Anybody else see how fast that suddenly got?
Did forever, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're done.
Right? Look, the thing says that we've been live for like 2.5 minutes, and that was supposed to be a minute countdown, and it was like chug-a-lugging along, and then Will and I are off to the side in the private chat talking about how we're about to just shut that thing off, and it's like whoop, whoop. So weird. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Coffee Table Talks with Will McCullen and me. And also today we have Chad Rikansrud, who is my new favorite mainframe hacker because there's like 2 on the planet and he's one of them.
I'm way better than the other guy.
I mean, you're here. I'm just saying.
Right?
Yeah, so welcome everybody. I hope everybody found it okay. I see Will is shouting out from LinkedIn, so that's great. Man, I hope that little tick slowdown doesn't mean anything. No, we're good.
We had our glitch for the mission.
Woo! Good thing we got that out of the way. Woo!
On the YouTube, it says Vicky is listening while driving. So Vicky, drive safe.
That's right. Both hands on the wheel.
Oh my gosh, Vicky. Yeah, don't do anything crazy. Man, I hope we don't distract her too bad.
You might want to pull over because this is going to get crazy. I don't know how you could concentrate on driving right now.
Oh, greetings from Sao Paulo, Brazil. What? We're global today. Look at that. We are a global show.
Now for something completely different.
Good morning. Oh, wait, I guess it's, what do they speak in Brazil? Is it Buenos Dias? Do we just say Buenos Dias?
Yeah, you can say that.
Cool. Yay. Well, there's some South American countries I speak like Portuguese and some other stuff I don't understand, so gotta check it out. So Chad, thank you for coming and chilling with us and having some coffee. Hey Jared, we're glad you made it. Woo. Thank you so much. Look, we thank you so much that Josh turned on the lightsaber.
I love it. I'm
rocks.
Very happy about that. And also a little worried for your safety right now. Is there any, do you want us to give you a heads up if he starts coming for you?
Yes, please. That would be super creepy, by the way. We could do a horror movie based on the fact that Mannequin Skywalker just starts walking towards Rachel with a lightsaber. It's going to be
Skywalker.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't go wee, wee. It'd
be so terrifying. So are you a fan of Star Wars at all, Chad?
I mean, is it an option not to be? Because I didn't know that. I mean, yes. Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself like a complete and utter, but I'm a big fan.
Nice. I've noticed there's 2 schools of thought. It's either you're into Star Wars or Star Trek. And there's like not a lot of overlap too much.
I like Star Trek, but I definitely watch less Star Trek than Star Wars. Although it's different because there's there's hundreds of Star Trek episodes, whereas you can get through Star Wars in a weekend.
Right.
Yeah, it's easier, more consumable. But I grew up on Star Trek, but I grew up on like the original ones with like, Jim and Bones and Scotty and the crew, right?
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't. I really kind of stopped after like next generation. I watched a little bit, but that was I just it was not because I didn't like it, but just I watched other things that were important at the time. Period pieces like Beavis and Butthead.
Yes, cultural icons of the 90s, man. Here we go.
That's right.
Absolutely. So just for everyone who's coming here, we had a small snafu because Rachel puts together things at 5 a.m., half one eyeball open, typing. And I got
a new job. I got a new job today.
And definitely Chad works for BMC software. So just saying, we're going through some editorial things in the different posts that are different places. But so I'm going to let Chad tell you how I got IBM stuck in my head because it does have something to do with it.
Well, we're going to be talking about Mainframes, right? And they are the producer of the, what is really basically the last standing mainframe in terms of companies that used to be. There used to be a few other companies that made mainframes, but now mean, there are some offshoots by HP and Unisys and whatnot, but really the mainframe and the one we're talking about is made by IBM. So I do spend a lot of time working with IBM. I love my peeps over at IBM. I have lots of friends there that I deal with on a regular basis. So, there's definitely worse places you could have assigned me to. But I work for BMC Software, which makes software and does services for not only mainframe but other stuff. We were the company that I worked for was called RSM Partners. We were recently acquired. It was a year ago, but in pandemic terms, it feels like yesterday.
That's yesterday.
It feels both like yesterday and 12 years ago at the same time, like a singular kind of it's like a quantum time thing. But yeah, anyway, so I work with BMC, not IBM. If you see that out there, but I do appreciate I hope I got a pay rise with it. I mean, that would be nice. The new job. I mean, right? Can you work that out?
I bet you for all the IBMers out there, because there's so many employees that they were probably like, oh, let me look them up. Hit the directory. Where I can't find.
No joke. I did have at least two, because I have the LinkedIn, like the pro version. You can see who looks at your profile and all these kinds of things, right? I did have two people from IBM look at my profile this morning. Now, that may not have been related at all to this, but then again, maybe.
Sorry.
That's all right. No problem.
My bad.
We all work for IBM at the end of the day, so it's really not wrong.
True facts. So there are actually a surprising amount of organizations that still depend on mainframes.
There are.
By the way, a friend of mine, Josh, not the husband Josh, the friend Josh, did a write-up like yesterday that we posted up on the LinkedIn page, or he posted through his LinkedIn, and then the Secure Nation. Yeah, it was really cool. And
really good job, Josh. Nice work.
Yes, high five, John. It was awesome. But it was like so much of financial organizations and like all these percentages and numbers. And for those who like percentages and numbers, go check out the article. Good job. But yeah, and then there's guys like Chad who are like, these things are just.
Oops.
Did that happen for me or just
No, I did.
What Rachel was about to say there are people like Chad who know that these things are just big computers and they're just big complicated computers, but they just happen to be super important. So if you are a large financial organization or an airline or a government or retail or healthcare, and you've been around for more than, let's say, 15 years, and you deal with a tremendous number of transactions, high value, or high volume transactions, there's a reasonable chance you have one of these platforms, and it's systemically important to your business. I mean, it doesn't. One does not get a mainframe sort of lightly, right? They're expensive, they're complicated, but generally speaking, if you have one, whatever you're doing with it is important. Meaning that to put it another way, I worked for a financial institution for 20 years. In part of that time, I ran data center operations for the global company, and the last thing you want is a mainframe outage, because that basically means that the company itself is probably not doing business in a meaningful way, right? Like you think about that, those impacts are very real. You're out to dinner with your new, the person you're on a date with, right? And you want to impress them, and you go to run your credit card, and it's like declined, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that could
not only that, but with like the whole ZVM element, now that they're taking virtual machines to a massive level, it can affect a whole lot in one fell swoop.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the, Rachel mentioned, I say a lot that the mainframe is just another computer, which it is, but also a lot of the technologies that we take for granted today came out of mainframe. So you mentioned, virtualization. I mean, ZVM has been around for a long time and has been virtualizing operating systems, like most mainframe operating systems, and they run ZOS, which is the kind of the common 800-pound gorilla operating system. But there's other ones, ZTPF, ZVSE, ZLinux, which is just Linux virtualized on the mainframe. But generally speaking, nothing runs on bare hardware. It runs on some kind of a hypervisor. They've got ZVM. They can also run a couple of other different hypervisors as well on the actual physical hardware. And you're right, it is the density, if you will. I mean, we liken it when we talk to our clients as a kind of a data center in a box, right? It's,
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, we have the pleasure. We're here in Tucson. Hey, she's back. We have the pleasure here in Tucson of having a large IBM, right? So when the students go down and get to see actually this hardware, man, you should see the cases on these things. They would make the most rad, glorious refrigerator freezers.
Kegerator.
Kegerator. I mean, they are awesome, but the density that's involved and the technology behind it is quite impressive. So from a hacking perspective, though, what new opportunities does that open up? Where are the Achilles heels in this type of scenario?
I'm concerned for all the eye rubbing. I was
it's pollen season here, and so I have
here too.
I get like a hay fever kind of allergy reactions. Anyway, I mean, this is the thing. There's a couple different angles of this, and we just blew the last 20 minutes while I answer this. I mean, there's a couple of different things, right? One of them is that the risk factor of being able to hack a mainframe, whether you're legit or you're black hat or whatever it is so high because of the density of the tech. So let me just give it by way of example. I love examples and kind of analogies. If you go into an enterprise and you pop a Linux box or a Windows box or whatever, you don't necessarily by virtue just own the SAN or the network equipment behind it. Like, you have that instance of that, but there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to take that further, pivot, and expand or whatever. Conversely, though, if you go in and you're able to get privileges escalated and access to COS, you now have access to all of the storage and the tape and the networking and multiple databases and tons of applications, thousands of application interfaces on those systems. I mean, these systems can do thousands and thousands of transactions per second, right? They do more transactions per second globally than Google does. And it's the opportunity then to wreak havoc is exponential by virtue of getting access to these systems. Now, I mentioned that just because you asked what opportunities. The problem is that where we live right now is the security posture of these platforms, as implemented or as configured by the people that run them right now, isn't great. They have all the tools. They have all of the modern abilities to be very secure. I would absolutely put a fully secure mainframe on the internet at DEF CON anywhere you want and be like, have at it, right? There's no reason they can't be absolutely bulletproof from a security perspective, but most of them in most of the organizations where they live right now, they're not, and that comes through a number of there's a number of reasons behind that. The biggest one is the availability up until recently, and when I say recently, maybe the last 5-10 years, the primary goal was availability. And because of all the things I just mentioned, you never wanted these systems to go down, right? And there's a couple things that bring systems down. You either did something to it or something broke, right? And they're highly available, meaning that the something broke generally isn't a problem because there's a redundant something, like we were talking about, Will, ahead of this, right? The ability for them to swap storage kilometers away within seconds, like that type of thing. Or then it really comes down to somebody did something. And patching is a thing that people do that often has impacts to production. And so by definition, up until the last 5-10 years when production was key, people patch these systems maybe once a year, maybe once a quarter, maybe, because they wanted to just keep them available. And I think there was a little bit of underlying thinking that maybe they weren't hackable, and they do benefit a lot from security by obscurity. I mean, that's just the fact. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time educating people on this, and ultimately going in there and trying to bring them up to the enterprise level of security that they've come to expect from any other platform. And that's why I tag this line of, it's just another computer. You need to treat it like a computer. You have policies and procedures and best practices that you apply to Linux and networking and Windows and your IoTs and whatever. You need to apply them here as well, and not give this thing a pass, because, you know, it's realistic now that people can hack this thing, and geez, you know, God help you if they do, right, for your enterprise.
Well, it's a double-edged sword for education and outreach on that, though, too. You know, like, people just don't know. So here we go, trying to make sure that they're all aware of the vulnerability of their mainframe, and that it is just a computer, but it, you know, obviously way more powerful. And then the other side of that, though, is that you're also kind of, you know, tipping off the bad guys or girls.
This is,
you know what I mean? You're like,
yeah, the bad people out there. I mean, this is the age-old, you know, internet Twitter bar fight argument, is like, do you release O days in the wild? Because at that point you look, it serves to motivate people, right? As soon as Microsoft Patch Tuesday rolls around, everybody in the world is out there reverse engineering those patches to see what they fixed and to try to create an exploit for them. But the good guys, the defenders, the good people defending their systems know that, and thus it's incumbent upon them to fix it. And I'm firmly in the camp that you know, responsible disclosure, but it needs to be disclosed. And the mainframe doesn't live in that world right now. And so what you get is this kind of lackadaisical, maybe not as concerned attitude about keeping it up to date, because, well, you know, do people really know about this? The vulnerabilities aren't talked about publicly, so how bad can it really be? And that's a rough, scary place to be in when you're betting literally the firm on that. You know, I wouldn't lobby for that.
No, look, I got to tell you, I told a couple of people, you know, just kind of through conversations, I was like, yeah, I'm going to talk to this awesome guy, Chad, on Friday. We're going to talk about hacking mainframes. I got laughed at twice for how outdated and not current this conversation was.
Yeah.
No.
Twice.
That's a rough one. I mean, look, here's the thing. Because they're not a very common platform, and when I say common, I'm going to compare it to, like, you know, the number of Androids or Windows or Macs out there, right? So because it's not a terribly common platform, there's a lot of misconceptions around, and there aren't a lot of people to dispel those misconceptions. So when you got media or just the average know-it-all running with a story, then there's really not a lot of people to combat that misinformation. And what most people... The irony, Rachel, is that most people are conflating something that has its roots in the 50s with something that is old and neglected. It'd be like me talking about a Tesla and saying, like, you still drive a car? Like, the fuck? I'm sorry, can I swear? Like, what is that? You know, like, that is, you know, that's got its, like, 1930s technology, like 4 wheels and a motor and a, you know, like, what is that even? Why do people drive cars anymore around? You know,
right. Rather
than looking at, like, listen, there's been a lot of companies who have neglected to update their mainframes, software, hardware, whatever. And yeah, they're running old, outdated tech, but not because it's old, outdated tech today, because they've neglected it. And the irony in all of that is it's still working in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah.
Like, you might have something from 2000 that's still working in the government. So, like, show me something else that's 20 years old, still handles the workload, doesn't break down, still operates, does everything you need to do that was released 20 years ago. I mean, it's actually more of a testament to them at this point. But you know, just to dispel that, they're very new, modern systems. They release a new version of the operating system every couple of years, a new version of the hardware every couple of years. As Will can attest to, the storage and all the other peripheral type stuff is very modern and some of the coolest cutting edge tech out there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you got laughed at.
Thank you. Because I was like, this is, because, I mean, you know, Josh did more, friend Josh did more of the research, right? It really went down some rabbit holes with some things and pulled some numbers out, and we were talking back and forth about it. And he was like, it looks like most of everybody's financial anything is still existing somewhere, being passed through a mainframe.
Absolutely.
Somewhere.
Yeah. You write a check, use a credit card, debit card, ATM machine, take it, airplane, retail from any large retailers, use any government services, healthcare. You got a insurance company, auto insurance, health insurance, any of that. You're using them all day, every day, and it's because they're so available and so resilient that people don't get it, right?
Well,
and it's like, how could you disparage something like that literally powers most of the economy as you know
but
it?
Also a good portion of this visibility, right? The thing that you need to think about is the power. These devices, first of all, are incredibly expensive, right? So they're never going to have the title commodity, right? But being that large and that expensive means that they're an investment. So the ones that are using this type of technology have huge investments placed behind that, because like the financial sectors, things like that need to have that kind of functionality, you're not going to see as much. But man, what a data miner that could be, right?
Yeah.
But apart from that, we know that there are so many very large organizations, even those that are using the commodity hardware, that have not really taken the proper precautions, which falls back into the standard problem of what we call lazy IT, right? Not taking the time to make sure that things are segmented properly. You mentioned updates, accounts that should have been expired and things like that. In the mainframe arena, and I'm just guessing here, and you let me know, that things like old accounts and segmentation and stuff like that, is that a huge problem? I mean, is that, because that's kind of
a
big company.
It is.
Right?
Listen, it all comes back to a lot of it comes back to a knowledge and staffing problem. You have the people who understand the platform that still operate it tend to be closer to retirement than they are to beginning their careers. That's one. Two, they've been trained on how to operate this thing to get peak performance out of it. Like you mentioned, Will, they're very expensive, and it used to be. I mean, every CPU cycle, every kilobyte of RAM and disk had to be accounted for, and was it something I said? And so, like, they got very good at running these things at peak efficiency. Am I not making that up? That's happening, right?
No, she's about to get attacked. Yeah.
Is it moving closer to you? It looks like it's moving closer to you. But ultimately, that what you're lacking there are people who also understand, like, the current threat landscape and how computers get attacked and what you do to prevent those kinds of things. And that, generally speaking, there's not a lot of overlap there. So there are people like me who both have some deep technical knowledge of the mainframe, but also understand how attacks and threats and exploits and vulnerabilities work. And there isn't really, Rachel made the joke about two of us. There might be a dozen, maybe worldwide, and we're all on a Slack channel. Honestly, like, there really aren't that many. And whoa, where did the lightsaber go? And so, there really aren't that many. And so it is a problem that we see. Very, very common vulnerabilities that the rest of the kind of mature enterprise IT have long since kind of put behind them. You still find them, right? But like default passwords and disable, like, we've got solutions, whether people are implementing it or not. We've got good solutions for those things. It's shame on you, right? But a lot of the technical security folks in the mainframe are still behind, being told kind of where they need to be at. And oftentimes they're strapped for people in budget because, again, it's a victim a little bit of its own success. The thing runs and it works, and you spend a lot of money getting it up and going. And I know when I worked there, like, I would regularly have people retire that they wouldn't let me replace. And so you do more with fewer, more with fewer, more with fewer. And eventually there's enough of just keeping the care and feeding, keeping the lights on, where it's like, hey, there's this new feature functionality that came out in, encrypting all of our comms point to point from the mainframe. Can you look into that? Like, who's got time, right? Who has the time to do that, and to research it?
And again, being a device that is that big of a production, you don't turn a semi, you don't bootleg turn a semi. So every time it's a major deal when you have to go through and do updates and things like that. For anyone who's done a data center, it's like, oh no, not another.
It's complicated too. It is a complicated platform. I mean, to learn, the learning curve is steep, and everything is meant to be backwards compatible. So herein lies the rub. Code that's written in the 60s and 70s can still run on the newest mainframes flawlessly. Think about that, right? Like something that was compiled in the 70s could still run on the newest iteration of the hardware because the hardware and the operating system are that good at being backwards compatible. Well, the enemy to backwards compatibility, though, is change. And so if you want to introduce, say you want to introduce something as simple as passphrases, right? So you want to introduce passphrases, something longer than 8 characters. You will probably have on your mainframe a whole bunch of different screens and interfaces and remote APIs and whatever that just expect those password fields to be 8 characters. And so to implement something like passphrases to make the system more secure or two-factor authentication necessarily means that you have to do the analysis to increase the size of all those fields. That is a tremendous undertaking, right? This is a tremendous undertaking for a platform that's been around for 50 years in this organization, and they've built all kinds of apps around it on these assumptions that the password field's always going to be 8 characters, just as an example. So to implement these things requires a tremendous amount of not only knowledge of the system, but the ability to do that analysis to know what's it going to break and what are we going to have to update along with it to make sure we can implement this new feature or this new patch or whatever it might be.
So that just had me thinking then if that's the case, I wonder how many large mainframe institutions have restrictions on their LDAP directories or Microsoft directories down to where they can only have so many passwords across the entire enterprise simply because
the mainframe is the least common denominator often in 90% of the places I'm in, maybe more, for password complexity. And if you have, I'll just come right out and say it, like if you have an enterprise, single service password reset and you're doing it to a password complexity algorithm that will meet everybody's standards, you're probably dumbing it down to the mainframe, right? And so where that becomes a problem is if I go in and rock up to do a red team or pentest with and a lot of times I'll partner with a traditional NetPen type organization. If they're able to go in and dump a whole bunch of Active Directory credentials and crack all the passwords, pretty good chance those are going to work immediately on the mainframe. Or conversely, the mainframe might be the weakest link. I get in and I can dump the database and crack passwords there, and we can play those backwards into the enterprise and get domain admin because the mainframe passwords were terrible, right?
Oh, that's awesome. It's good that Active Directory installations are bulletproof. So we're good there.
Yes. That's
yeah. So people outside of InfoSec, I tell them, hey, do you know how to turn on your multi-factor? Hey, do you know how to do this? And they look at me crazy and I'm like, please figure it out. It's important. And it's this, and you know how people have that sense of security through obscurity about their mainframe situation? It's kind of like this false sense of security that it's so technologically advanced that we have all these apps at our fingertips and all these things that we can do just immediately. And I have an entire computer in the palm of my hand. It must be secure.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't know how to break this to you. It's going to be okay, but it's not. Okay. It's like a lot of these things are held together with shoestring and duct tape and a really crappy password, guys.
Well, and they're built by people who are notoriously good at making mistakes and not being able to spot their own mistakes. I mean, it wasn't that many years ago. Does somebody remember when there was like a core piece of iOS that had a goto in it? Do you remember this? Like, this was a bug that came out. Like, there was a core iOS flaw that was literally like I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a programming 101 kind of like if then and a go-to statement where it's just like, yeah, that you'll never hit this, right? Like this piece of code will never get executed kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, all this stuff is written by people. The hardware is designed by people. I mean, you don't have to go back that far to remember Spectre and Meltdown, right? Like nobody's fallible in their assumptions on how this stuff should work. And it always, because look, these companies need to make money, performance and production and availability is the name of the game, right? And so security is always going to be a
features. Don't forget features. That's the important part.
Yeah, unless you're selling security, and even if you're selling security, functionality is still important, right? I mean, security companies never get hacked, right? Yeah. So it's a I didn't start out in the mainframe world. In terms of my origin in this, I didn't start out here. I was a developer and a DBA for a short period of time, and got into security and Linux administration, and then started doing malware reversing kind of on my own just for fun. And I'm also kind of a crypto means cryptography, by the way, nerd, and into those kinds of things. And in the mainframe stuff came much later. I was actually in senior management, and I'm getting tired of not using most of my brain. Sorry. And I decided I wanted to get back into the tech side of things. But as a, at that time, 30-something, and in senior management, hadn't been hands-on tech. How do you get back into hands-on tech, right? I mean, I don't what's that? You're killing me. So I didn't want to start at the beginning, right? I didn't want to go be somebody's, analyst at that point in time in my career, and nobody was going to pay me to do it. So I kind of came up with this idea. I mean, other people had been one or two other people had kind of started blazing this ground, but I came up with this idea for myself on my own. It wasn't a career path. It was more of a, man, who's doing offensive and R&D analysis on mainframe hacking, and because I managed it, and I know how important it was, and I saw what happened when it went down and how bad that was for the enterprise, and I was like, I wonder if do viruses and buffer overflows and all this kind of stuff work on this platform? Is it some kind of magic unicorn? And no. The answer is no, it's not, and it does, and all those things work. And I was like, hey, here's a niche, right? I can use my credentials and my credibility as having been in the industry for 10, 20 years, along with my technical know-how, and blend them together to something that I think people will want, so I can start out as an expert instead of having to start out as a noob and work my way up. I'm still a noob, but I mean, in terms of the types of positions that I want, the more senior level positions, I'm still a noob. I'm still learning every day. There's so many things I don't know, but that worked out good. I mean, that worked out. I started consulting and went over to the dark side of consulting and being a vendor and that kind of stuff, and I've never looked back. It's been fabulous.
Okay, but here's one. So you are a pen tester for a hacker for Big Iron. What's your test box?
Oh, I have several.
And how much is your electric bill?
It's a lot.
Not bad. So, first of all, I have access to physical hardware that I can play with via employers and whatnot. But IBM makes a hypervisor that emulates Z architecture because, as you are implying, it's a different CPU. Now, people a lot of times we'll get to the second or third date with people before they ask me if it's does this thing run on Intel or ARM? It's a different CPU. It's not obvious, right? It's a different operating system, but they make their own CPU. It's called Z architecture. It's big and it's pretty, but they make a hypervisor that runs on Linux that emulates the hardware, and you can run any Z operating system on it. So it emulates Z architecture, and you can run ZOS, ZTPF, ZFVSE, ZLinux, ZVM. So I have at one point in time when I was bored, everybody does the inception thing with VMs when they first figure it out. So I had a Windows machine running Linux, running ZVM, running Linux, running ZVM, and they use ZVM to debug and develop ZVM at IBM. But yeah, so my normal test machine is on my Mac. I run VMware Fusion, running Ubuntu, running their hypervisor, running ZOS, and that's my normal. And then if I need a bigger one or one when I teach class, I run it in the cloud. I run it on Amazon. Just a Amazon Linux box. So they sell this. You can buy it. It's not it's not. So I'm going to say it's not expensive, and that is not directed at people who want to just do this as a hobby. I think it's like $5 or $10,000 for the initial license, and then there's some smaller amount of maintenance per year. So if you work for a company and your company buys your software for you, it's not that expensive. If you're
it's at the low cost of nothing to you.
Yes. If you are a person wanting to do this for your own, hacking pleasure, then obviously that's a pretty big investment. But
yeah, you might want to start a GoFundMe.
Yeah, I'll kick in if you do. But there, that is a. But if people do want to just kind of learn like the core of ZOS MVS, there's actually a free version from decades ago that was released to public domain that a lot of the core concepts still apply. It's called Turnkey MVS. You can Google that, look it up. It doesn't have a lot of the modern features, but it does have a lot of the quirky stuff that you have to learn how ZOS, how mainframes work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but everybody should have a mainframe. Everybody should have one.
Everybody should have one, at least 2. Get it a friend. It's going to get lonely.
Yeah, I know, right? You have to have, backup, redundancy. You can't just have one.
It'll get all like really sad and depressed. It's bad, especially if you don't take it for a walk.
Newcomb work?
You can run Bitcoin miners on there if that's your thing, but I don't know,
I have one.
You making any money off? Is that what they look like?
It is. Wait, I put it in a special case because it's so worth a lot of money.
Yeah. Don't drop it. It'll just turn into ones and zeros if you drop it.
Like what? Just so everybody knows, that's not really how that works. I don't want to spread false information.
Man, it's just fun. My mentions blowing up now. That's not how any of this works.
At all. Thank you for everybody who's hanging out a little bit past the 30-minute mark. As you know, sometimes we run over. Sometimes we're on time. It's kind of how that works. If anybody wants to come and hang out with me and Chad or Will, just reach out. DM us. We'll be happy to set up a couple minutes and hang out and meet you in person. And we'll face to face as we're going to get right at the moment. Happy to do that anytime. Next week, we're going to be hanging out with Cytisus eurydice. It's a mouthful, right? It's beautiful. It's a beautiful name.
Wow, that is amazing.
Cytisus eurydice. It's super just, I don't know. She's just a what do they call that? A mythological being. Just one of those. Anyway, they happen to do lots of fun things with the dark web. That's my dark web wizard, President Wizard. I always call on them anytime I need anything dark web related or question and answer time. They were actually on one of these with Will and I way back in October of last year, I believe. And now I'm asking them to be spotlight person.
That's awesome.
On the next one. So that's going to be next week. And Chad, thank you so much for explaining to us how important it is for us to not think our mainframes are no longer important, that nobody still uses them. Right. We all use them, right?
All use them. Hug your mainframe.
Hug your mainframe. Stop using it as the secondary refrigerator to put magnets on, you guys. Don't do that.
That's right. COBOL is not a 4-letter word. Let's just leave that.
It is not.
I love the comment that came in. His head is so shiny.
Is that me or you?
I can't see it. Can you see the chat?
Yeah, that's got to be one of our folks.
I mean, I've got the same hairstyle, so I'm.
I love it. You guys match. Aw. Coordinated before.
The lights.
Yeah, that's right. You do have you have the operating room lights on your head. So funny. I just had somebody from IBM ping me and be like, "I was one of the people that saw your profile. I had to see if you were still working here."
Whoops. Again,
that's awesome. We're gonna start that rumor though. We should have just let it go. We should have really just let it go and see what happens.
I mean,
that's kind of funny. So if I had changed my LinkedIn profile to say I work somewhere else, how long would it take for that company to be like, you You don't actually work here, right? Because do you?
How many companies do that? I wonder.
I don't know. That's kind of interesting.
Right? How many actually go through and like, because there's a company that that we work with at Secure Nation called Zero Fox, and they kind of do this.
Yeah, I know
By the way, if anybody ever wants some brand management or executive level protection monitoring stuff going on, they're really cool for it. We're gonna do an event with them soon. Anyway, more on that later. But they do that kind of stuff where they will go through and look and make sure that your executive level CEOs don't have like duplicate accounts or like stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
That people aren't misrepresenting your brand. But I wonder how many companies do that without something like that.
Well, I also wonder when I talk to my SE friends, like I assume that's a technique they use, like change their whole LinkedIn profile. So if they're trying to social engineer somebody, they look like they work with you.
I've known people to change it before, or like have dummy accounts sit for years.
Yeah.
And like then whenever they're ready to use it, that way it looks like they've been a member for years and you kind of trust it a bit more, kind of thing. Yeah, the background is not fake, you guys. It's real. For Will.
How come you guys can see the chat? I can't see the chat.
I've seen people do that before. I can't look when I disconnected.
Everything went to hell. It all went. That was it.
But you guys were still there. Josh had you play in his office, and I could hear it. And he was like, "You're okay." I was like, "Oh, geez." That's why I looked so refreshed when I came back on the camera instead of real stressed out because I was like, "It dropped the stream." No, it didn't. We're good. Okay, great. Oh my god! Thanks again, Chad.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, it was awesome, dude.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm always happy to be here. You want to have me back sometime, I'll come back and talk mainframes again, or mosquitoes, whatever.
Mosquitoes, one or the other. Yeah, I plan on making a trip to Minnesota, to your neck of the woods.
Excellent.
Probably around August, so that'll be great for me to hang out with mosquitoes and humidity.
And it'll be hot and humid as well. But
excellent.
There'll be some beautiful days, though. It's worth the gamble.
Oh man, yeah. Oh look, Joe, who was another guest on our show, he said shadow puppet accounts. We got to work on this lag, man, because there's so many people that want to comment right when we're talking about the thing, and then we go back and we're not talking about the thing, and then their message finally appears. Anyway,
technology. How does it even work? You know?
Technology and magnets, man. So we're gonna have to come hang out and grab a drink and
do that.
I got a few more friends in Minneapolis I got to come see and.
Do that. Cool. Schedule me in. You're like 4:15 to 4:45. I'm in.
Yes, it'll be so fun. If anybody else is in the Minneapolis area and wants to come hang out in August, let me know. Anyhow, we'll see y'all. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. We love you so much.